All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a really big one, a powerful and, let's be honest, often debated idea, biblical inerrancy. This is a concept that truly shapes the faith of millions. So let's jump right in and figure out what it's all about. Okay, so let's start here. For a long time, people used the word inspired to talk about the Bible, where it came from. But then a question started popping up. What if inspired doesn't go far enough? I mean, couldn't a book be divinely inspired but still have, say, a few mistakes in it? And it's exactly that concern that really pushed some theologians to develop the more formal doctrine of inerrancy.
So, to really get a handle on what we're talking about, we've got to get specific. We need to move past just a general idea and look at a real formal definition. So, what does inerrancy actually mean when we talk about it in this context?
Okay, at its absolute core, inerrancy is making a really bold claim. It's saying that the Bible, in its original form, is completely true and reliable in everything it teaches. And this is key. It's not just about, avoiding a few typos. It's about being fundamentally incapable of error. And this right here, this is a super influential definition from something called the Chicago Statement. This is really important because it blows the doors wide open on what inerrancy covers. It's not just saying the Bible is right about spiritual stuff. No, it's claiming the Bible is factually trustworthy in everything it talks about. We're talking history, science, even the story of how the Bible itself was written.
Okay, so now here's where things get really interesting, and it might actually surprise you. The doctrine of inerrancy, it's not nearly as rigid as you might think. It actually has a surprising amount of flexibility and nuance built into it. And understanding this is key to clearing up some of the biggest misconceptions out there.
So, for example, inerrancy doesn't demand that every author sounds exactly the same. I mean, just think about the difference in style between John's very straightforward writing and Paul's, his really dense theological arguments. The doctrine also allows for different writers to report on the same event with slight variations in the details. And it doesn't mean the grammar has to be perfect by modern standards or that every single quote is a word-for-word recording.
And all of this brings us to a really crucial distinction. For proponents of inerrancy, it's all about the truthfulness of what's being taught. It's not about making the text fit our modern ideas of what perfect reporting looks like. The idea is that the core message, the teaching, is absolutely true, even if the styles and delivery methods of the human authors are different.
So you might be asking, okay, but how do they defend this idea?
Well, one of the most powerful arguments for inerrancy is built on a pretty fascinating theological analogy. Let's break down this core analogy because it's central to the whole argument. So on one side, you have Jesus. Theologically, he's called the living incarnate Word, the Word made flesh. And on the other side, you have the Bible, which they call the living written Word. The whole argument rests on drawing a direct line, a parallel between these two.
This table really lays out the logic perfectly. Here's how the thinking goes. Just like Jesus had human parents, he was fully human, but was divinely kept from sin, the argument is that the Bible had human authors, it was a human work, but was divinely guided to be without error. So in both cases, you end up with what's seen as a kind of divine-human partnership, a perfect product. Okay, but this brings up a huge practical question, right? If inerrancy is all about the original writings, what does that say about the Bibles that you and I have today? The ones that are copies of copies and translations.
And this is a really important detail. The formal doctrine of inerrancy applies specifically to what are called the original autographs. That's the very first manuscripts penned by the original authors. But here's the catch. We don't have any of them. None of those originals are known to still exist.
So, what do we do? How is this problem addressed? Well, it's through a whole field of study called textual criticism. Scholars have an incredible number of ancient copies to work with, over 5,700 Greek manuscripts just for the New Testament. And by carefully comparing all the tiny variations between these copies, they can basically work backwards, trace where mistakes or changes were made, and reconstruct what the original text almost certainly said. They can do this with a really high degree of confidence.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the how. But this all builds up to the biggest question of all. Why? Why does this doctrine matter so much to the people who hold it? What's really at stake here, theologically speaking? Well, according to those who champion inerrancy, if you reject it, even if you just allow for a few seemingly small errors, you open up a Pandora's box of major theological problems.
You see, the arguments are all linked together. It really starts with the character of God. The logic is a perfect God wouldn't create an imperfect book. From there, you get the slippery slope argument. If you find a mistake in a small historical or geographical detail, how can you be sure you can trust the really big theological claims, like salvation? And ultimately, it all boils down to authority. If the Bible has errors, then who gets to be the judge? Who decides which parts are true and which parts aren't? You see the problem?
So, for those who hold to inerrancy, the conclusion is unavoidable. It has to be total. The Bible's truthfulness has to cover every single thing it talks about, whether it's theology, history, or science. This is what reinforces its authority as the final, ultimate source of truth.
And that really leaves us with something to think about. This doctrine, it's not just some abstract, dusty theological idea. Believing that this text is completely without error, that fundamentally changes everything about how you read it, how you interpret it, and how you apply it to your life. It's way more than just a belief. For many, it's the very bedrock of their entire worldview.